you got cows that you got to milk every day. Like cows don't take a day off. So you really can't take a day off either. So my mom and dad just never could take a day off. We never traveled when I was growing up. And like my dad is very much like, why would I ever leave this town? I got everything I need here. So I didn't get a passport until I was 37. And the only reason why I got a passport, I had a whole school year to plan my travel. Now, originally I wanted to do the Asia circuit, but they weren't open because of COVID.
Yeah.
What's open? Where do I want to go? And Portugal was number 3 on my bucket list. It went Japan number 1, Korea number 2, Portugal number 3. And Portugal was open. So I spent 2 months in Portugal. And that is numero uno of countries. I'll get on a Zoom call with you. If you go out there between December and January, I'll meet you in Seoul. And I'll show you around. I'll show you to all my favorite spots. I'll take you away from the touristy stuff because anybody can find that. I love Seoul. I absolutely love it, and I love showing people that city.
Welcome to the Winging It Travel Podcast with me, James Hammond. Every Monday, I'll be joined by guests to talk about their travel stories, travel tips, backpacking advice, and so much more. Right now, I'm taking the podcast on the road travelling with me. So tune in every week for short-form episodes detailing all my travels alongside my Monday guest episode. Are you a backpacker, gap year student, or simply someone who loves to travel? Then this is the podcast for you, designed to inspire you to travel. There'll be stories to tell, tips to share, and experiences to inspire. Welcome to the show.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode where I'm joined by Billy Lahr from the Mindful Midlife Crisis Podcast. Billy has spent 21 years as an educator, but became disenfranchised in the last half due to budding mental health issues or concerns and a lack of job satisfaction. In 2021, Billy left his job as a Dean of Students to travel the world in search of more meaningful life experiences. So since then, he's been focused on teaching others how to navigate their own midlife crisis with more curiosity, openness, compassion, and awareness through the use of mindfulness, meditation, as well as practical and intentional daily routines that focus on consistency and discipline through his introductory Reflect, Learn, Grow mindfulness program. Billy, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, James.
Really excited about this chat. Thanks for coming on. Where are you in the world right now?
Well, I'm nowhere exciting right now. I'm in my dad's basement, which I think is kind of the trade-off when you're a digital nomad. From time to time, you have to come back and regroup after you've been traveling for a long time. But I'm only here for a couple more days, and then I'm heading out to Seattle, Washington. My sister lives out there. And then on November 13th, so that's in a week, 1 week from today, I will be heading back to Seoul, South Korea, because Seoul, South Korea is my happy place. And then I'll be there for 2 months. I'm going to go to Chiang Mai, Thailand for 2 months, and then to Hanoi for a month. I might change things up, but I'm not, a lot, you need, name of the podcast is Winging It Travel. I don't wing it. I'm not a winger.
Okay.
When people tell me to go with the flow, my flow is to schedule things. So that's that. I mean, so that's kind of how I interpret go with the flow. So when I go with the flow, I do what comes naturally to me, and scheduling comes naturally to me. So I kind of know where things are. I had a dude tell me one time last year, he's like, so where are you all traveling? And I had everything laid out. I knew where I was going to be and all that. And he goes, well, that's your problem. You're doing it wrong. And I'm like, huh? And he said, you're traveling wrong. You got everything planned out. And it took every ounce of you just like patience and understanding and compassion to just be like, don't punch him in the mouth. Do not punch this dude in the mouth. He thinks he knows the only way to travel. And, so I had to, harness my chi in that moment to be like, okay, all right, this is, you're taking this personally. There's no need to take this personally. That's how he travels. This is how you travel. So I know where I'm going to be at least through, I think, April 10th. And then after that, I'm going to have to reassess some things. Yeah.
That's a birthday, that's. Yeah. Maybe let me know when my birthday is a birthday treat. Where are you going to go next?
You can meet me in Hanoi if you want.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I love Hanoi. Yeah. But there's no right or wrong way. That's the number one thing from here. And we all travel differently. I don't travel all scheduled, I must admit, but that's because it's the way I travel, hence the name of the podcast. But I would never tell someone that's wrong. Bloody hell, like at the very least, at least you're out there. I mean, there's loads of people who are not doing it.
Right.
Crikey, yeah.
Yeah, and the reason why I've chosen those places, even though I've been to Chiang Mai and even though I've been to Hanoi before, I've been traveling now for 2 years, and I keep going back to Seoul. But last year particularly, or I guess at the beginning of 2023, I was bouncing around quite a bit. So I spent 3 months in Seoul, and I felt really good about that. But then I went to Thailand, and I was there for 6 weeks, and I went to like 4 or 5 different spots. So I was a week in every different spot. So I went to a Muay Thai camp for a week, and then I went to Bangkok for a week. I went to Chiang Rai for 4 days. I went to Chiang Mai for 2 weeks. I went to Krabi for a week, and I went to Phuket for a week. And then I went to Singapore for a week, and then I went to Da Nang for a week, and I went to Hanoi for a week, and I went to Osaka for 3 weeks, Kyoto for a week, Kanazawa for like 4 days, and then Tokyo for a month. And by the time I got to Tokyo, I realized just how frazzled I was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just like, it was too much. And so now when I'm going back, I want to feel stabilized.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a tourist anymore in Seoul. Like I've spent 8 months in Seoul. I don't really feel like a tourist anymore. I've got a great network of friends there. And then Chiang Mai is you just chill in Chiang Mai. Like
dream.
I don't know that there are things obviously to do, but that's just chill city.
Yeah.
So I love that about Chiang Mai. And then Hanoi is the opposite, whereas there's chaos everywhere, but it's this hum and this buzz. And I love that hum and buzz of the city. But I also want to take a couple day trips I've been to Halong Bay and I've been to Ninh Binh, but there are 2 day trips that I want to do. And they're kind of like 3-day trips because they're pretty far out. But it's that, I can't remember what the loop is, but you do like a motorcycle loop or a scooter loop or something like that.
Is that towards like Sapa?
Yeah, I think it's up that way. I think it's even further north of Sapa.
Okay, yeah. I think it's part of the route up there.
Yeah, so I want to do that. And then there's also, I'm going to mispronounce it, but Bangiak Waterfalls. And it's these beautiful waterfalls that border Vietnam and China. And they just look incredible. And I have a friend that is from Vietnam, and she's like, well, if you're going back to Vietnam, try and go here. And it's like 8 hours north of Hanoi. So it's going to take some effort to get up there. But I figure, okay, those will kind of be my excursions this time around, something different this time around. But otherwise, man, I'm just looking for a cheap place to chill for a while, because shit ain't cheap in the United States. So, I'm just going back to where it's cheap and it's chill.
Yeah, I think we discussed this a lot on the podcast about slow travel, because I talked about my experience this year because we left in January. It's been too quick. But there is one caveat to that, though. I don't know what you think about this, but we talked this the other day. Slow travel can only really happen in a couple of instances. One, you have a big pot of money because there's no rush to go anywhere, because you can just go for as long as you want because you've got a decent amount of money. Or you earn on the road as a digital nomad, because then you are going to have to do some work, right, if you're slow traveling, and then that makes it slow because you're probably somewhere for 2 weeks doing work, and then you're kind of living in other countries but slowly and seem a bit more intensely, because you probably do 2 weeks and there's like a weekend somewhere else, and it's like more like living real life but away from home. So because we didn't earn on the road and didn't have that bigger budget, we're kind of like trying to get places ticked off, and it is not the best way to travel. It's too fast. And like you said, we were frazzled by mid-October when we came back from the road trip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree. Like I'm not married. I don't have children, so I don't have the same responsibilities that a lot of people do.
Yeah.
A lot of other people do. I originally took a leave for a year, and then that just turned into a resignation because there wasn't going to be a way for me to transition back into that position.
Oh, okay.
And then I enjoyed being in Seoul so much that when I went back to the States, I just sold everything. I sold my condo that I absolutely love. But what was interesting, I was renting out my condo during my first year of travel. And when I got back there, it didn't feel like mine anymore. And I was the only person who had ever lived in that condo. And then this very lovely couple who really did a really nice job of keeping it up. And they were very, very sweet. But when I came back, it didn't feel like my home anymore. So I really had no problem letting that condo go. And like I said, I loved it. It was in a prime location. I had gotten a steal of a deal on it when I first bought it, and I made good money when I sold it. So I've been traveling on that here now for a while, or for the second year. So now I'm kind of going into year 2.5, year 3, and it's like, money's starting to run a little bit thin here.
Yeah.
So now I am kind of getting to that point where it's like, all right, it's sort of sink or swim time here. And I'm trying to build this coaching business. And man, being a solo entrepreneur is a lot of hard work. And it's all things that are new to me because I worked in education for 21 years. Yeah. So I never had to think about those other types of things. And now here I am moving into this solo entrepreneur and, and business aspect of things. It's like, woo, there's a lot to think about here. And when you're by yourself, like you don't have like everything is me. All the social media stuff that I hate doing, that I hate creating, all that content that I hate creating, like I have to do all that and then do the podcast on top of that too. And then like do the client reach out and it's a lot of hard work. Now, would I trade my new problems for my old problems? Hell no. Like
exactly.
I feel very fortunate and I'm eternally grateful for the opportunities that I've had and the experiences that I've had and the people that I've met, but then also the people who are in my core, like my parents, like my sister, like my really close friends who have really helped me out during this time so that I can, I guess, kind of continue living this life. But I also have kind of told myself that April 10th, that's sort of the dead date. You have due dates where this is the dead date. So if I'm not making progress in certain areas of my life here, particularly financially, that April 10th is the dead date, and it's go back and kind of cut your losses time and maybe and find the 9 to 5 or what have you. Find something that's stable, that's reliable, and not look at it as a loss. Like I think that's going to be the hardest thing, is not looking at it as a defeat, but just saying, hey dude, you had these really great experiences and what did you learn from it that you can now apply moving towards the next half of your life right here? I'm 46 years old. I've got a good chunk of time left. So what is it that I can do? What are the skills that I've acquired? Who are the connections that I've made that where I can continue, living my purpose? And that's sort of what I coach people too, is like understanding your strengths and exploring your curiosities and finding your connections, finding your community. Because if you do those 3 things, then you find your purpose. This whole idea of start with your purpose. What the hell if I don't know what my purpose is?
Yeah, tell me about it. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. And I also I get so irate when people say, follow your passions. No, don't follow your passions. Please, for the love of God, don't follow your passions, because oftentimes we conflate passions with hobbies.
Yes.
And passion is a byproduct of all the work that you put in, because what you do is you recognize, I'm good at this and I'm connected with these people and I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to be disciplined. I'm going to be patient with this. And if you do all that, then boom, you have a passion. But it isn't, I'm passionate about this. And then you do it. No. You started doing it. You realized you had a knack for it. You realized that there was curiosity involved. You realized that there was a community of support in there. And then boom, that turned into a passion. So please, for the love of God, people, stop following your passion. stop telling people if you're going to be a high school graduation commencement speaker. If you say follow your passion, and I find out about you, I'm giving you the Liam Neeson speech from Taken.
It's interesting because I'm in the same spot as you, actually. Yeah, trying to work out that solo entrepreneur thing, which is exciting and daunting at the same time. And what I've realized is, because I'm now not working at the minute, the amount of hours I'm putting into the podcast on the side is full 8, 9, 10-hour days. I'm like, wow, how do I do that with a job? So it's a bit scary. But at least I'm doing it now before I have to get a job in the new year. But you're absolutely right about trying to figure that out, because in the real world, money does dry up. I think people see this on, especially on Instagram, where this like idyllic lifestyle where it's easy and people travel the world. It's not. It's absolutely hard work. And I spoke to my friend Katrina in the week, who came onto the podcast, and she's a career coach, and she just wrote a book for dummies, actually. And she said to me on the podcast originally that she left her corporate job, went on a 15-month trip, then had to go back to a job, and she didn't see it as a loss. She saw it as, okay, so I liked what I did. I've now got no money. I need to reassess how to get back to that place again, but also put it in a different way. So it's quite interesting. You don't see them as losses, you see them as like the next thing that you've learned. Because I'm worried that if I go back to a job, that this year, apart from travel, which has been great, like personally, professionally, and growth-wise, I've not succeeded. But I think I need to give myself a bit of slack, because there's a different mode you need to go into, and as entrepreneur mode is a very different mode to just traveling, and that's something I'm trying to learn.
Yeah, I think one thing that I'm trying to kind of program into my brain here a little bit. Adam Grant, who I really love Adam Grant. If people don't know who Adam Grant is, give him a follow on Instagram. But he is an organizational psychologist. He's got all sorts of books out there. He's got a couple different podcasts out there. But, daily he kind of posts these things. And there's this saying, and I used to really believe in this saying, that comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And he reframed that, and he said, comparison is not the thief of joy. Comparison can actually be motivating. You can look at somebody and say, I want to get to that level, and then recognizing what it is that you got to do in order to get to that level. What the thief of joy is envy. When you look at something and you say, you're envious that person has it, and then you let that build up inside of you. And my other favorite podcast is the Jordan Harbinger Show. I love Jordan Harbinger, and they've talked about this idea of envy too. And I think what has really kind of helped me reframe looking at people who, on social media, who I want to emulate. What Jordan said is, you have to, if you want to trade lives with that person, you have to trade every aspect of your life for every aspect of their life. Mm-hmm. So, you think about, hey, Brad Pitt's got it made, but he also doesn't have a lot of privacy.
Yeah.
There are things that you have to weigh in all of that too. Like, you're not cherry picking. You're taking every aspect of that person's life. And so I think that's why when I think about, I wouldn't trade my new problems for my old problems. I think in 6 months down the road, right, if I get to a point where I have to go back to the classroom, I think the real internal work for me is going to be, hey man, you cannot trade this life for your old life, because then you have to take on all the other things that came with it too. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really where my mindfulness practice comes in. It's just like, hey, let's work on being present. And if there are people out there who are like, this guy kind of sounds like a spaz. There's no way this dude meditates. I meditate so I can be this level of obnoxious, because if I didn't, I'd be an out of control asshole. So that's why I meditate. And I like working with people who have that same high energy, that same high intensity. I like working with those kind of people because I relate to those kind of people. We had Jeannie Love, who's an ADHD coach, on my show a while back. It's episode 99 if people want to listen to that. And she's like, just talking to you the last couple of times here, you might have some ADHD symptoms. And I'm like, that's interesting. I've long wondered if that is the case.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have an official diagnosis, but there are certainly things that when I look at the ADHD symptoms checklist, I'm like, yep. So, that's just how my mind works. I move pretty fast. And so that mindfulness practice creates opportunities for me to slow down. And they're much needed opportunities too. And they provide me an opportunity, especially to assess a situation so that I can respond as opposed to react. And I feel like in the last few months, it's been a bit more chaotic than I anticipated. And if I could do these last 5 months over again, I would.
Yeah.
I would. There are some changes that I would certainly make. Now, the first 6 months of 2023, I'd relive those days over and over and over
Same.
again. I really enjoyed it. But then again, it's just like, hey, this is where you are in the present. So how do we make the most of what is right now in front of you? This is your present. So let's assess what resources do you have, what skills do you have, what connections do you have to get to where it is that you want to be in 6 months. And it's this whole idea of don't ever give up, well, like poker players, they quit 80-90% of the hands that they play.
Yeah.
Because they know that when they get dealt a good set of cards, that's when they're going to play. And they don't go all in on all of them too. They're strategic about it. So I think we need to live life more like poker players and take strategic risks. And we don't have to go all in unless we firmly believe that, hey, this is something that I can go all in. Is that playing it safe? I guess if people want to look at it that way, they can. But again, you're taking strategic risks. So what's the risk that you can afford? I could afford to take 2.5 years off, but I don't think I can afford to take 3 years off. So that's kind of why I have that dead date, because to me, that's where I say, all right, like at some point in time, we have to cut this off. So we can continue and let's make this, let's do all the things that have been working. But if they don't, if it doesn't turn into fruition, if it doesn't turn into something substantial, then hey, what are the skills that you can fall back on? What are the opportunities you can fall back on? And then kind of that, like I said, that internal work of this is not a loss. This is not a defeat. This is maybe a setback, but then what is it that you essentially want to get to, and how can this new experience move you towards that? So, I mean, life is like the stock market. I mean, there's ups and downs. But if you invest in yourself, then you're going to reap the dividends at some point in time. And you just have to be patient and disciplined and consistent and self-compassionate.
So interesting, because the envy thing is very interesting, because you're absolutely right about you cannot wish you were someone else. The classic example of this that a lot of people would have seen was the Last Dance by Michael Jordan documentary. Now, I love NBA. Like, would I love to be like Michael Jordan, like smashing like slam dunks over people? Yeah, of course I would. But look at how he is now. He's still a bit bitter about players. Yeah, he's a billionaire. Is he happy? I mean, I'm not sure he is, but he is the best player ever. So You can't say you want to be best player ever and then not do his journey. That doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. And I think people just need to realize that your own journey is just as valuable as anyone else's journey. It's just about, you've got to be honest with yourself about what is the end goal, and are you happy with that goal either now or what you're aiming towards? Because if you're not, then you've got to change route and make a plan, but don't start wishing other people, because then that's a pretty sad way of looking at life, I think.
Yeah, and people didn't just wake up. There's no such thing as an overnight success.
No, of course not. Yeah.
We had I was talking to Rich Bracken, and like Rich Bracken jokes that he is a 6-year overnight success. So so that's just one of those things where it's like people don't see the work that you put in and day out. They just see all of a sudden, boom, you are noticed, or like that you're being noticed by a lot of people.
Yeah.
And people don't understand the amount of work that goes in, that most people put into that. Even like, influencers, that kind of thing. Most of them, I mean, they're putting in, a lot of them are putting in a lot of work in terms of like creating content or editing video. I can't, like vloggers. I mean, kudos to all the vloggers out there.
I'm going into it. That's what I'm doing next.
Yeah. Kudos to you, man, because going through that video and just like, and tediously, like, I don't want to make a 10-second TikTok. like it is. So I've been apprehensive to get on TikTok just because I'm like, I don't want to, curate videos and that sort of thing. Like I want to do it in one. I'm kind of like Bob Dylan. I want to do it in one take and just go from there.
Yeah. God, I wish I was like him. Yeah. But I think what people don't realize also with the podcast is stuff that I do share the stat a lot. When I come to end of last year, in the places in travel for 2022, I was in the top 1% of content created for putting stuff out there, not downloads, just how much I've put out there, which is like, I guess they calculate the hours that you put of content. So interviews like this and compare it to the rest of the people in that category. And I was in the top 1%. So when people see that, they have to realize that is a shit ton of work. Like, and I'm not joking about this. And it is so much work to get these episodes out because the hours in the day is not enough compared to real life as well. You probably got a job or you're traveling or whatever. So 2023 has been interested in that. And it's like going forward, you mentioned earlier about your April 10th date. I think I have like a bit of a longer one, like a 2-3 year end date where I'm trying to think, well, I've got 2-3 years, I think, to really work at this side. I don't want to call it side hustle. I don't really like that term, but like, what can I do in the future that I'm my own boss and I'm making my own money and not at the word is really, I'm not speaking to someone, like another boss or a contract at a company or stuff like that. Like, how can I be my own thing? And that's a tough journey, and it requires a heck of a lot of work and connections. And I think entrepreneurs do get, they must just, I don't know how they sleep, because they must just get bogged down. There's something to do every hour of the day. And even I'm struggling now trying to get myself going, like at night, like, oh yeah, I should be doing that. I've got to do that. I don't know how people switch off in this mode. So it's something I've got to learn.
Yeah. I was just thinking here as I'm like, do we sound ungrateful that we're in this position? And I think more than anything, we're talking about like, I think people often romanticize the digital nomad life, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, and listen, I imagine you've had amazing experiences and I have had amazing experiences too. And along with that, there's also these challenges as well. So, and I like I said, it just kind of goes back, would I trade my new problems for no problems? No, I wouldn't. I am so grateful. And I also understand too that, there's an ounce of privilege that comes along with these experiences too,
100%.
that to be able to afford these opportunities and, go places and really feel accepted and be able to connect with people wherever I go. So I absolutely understand all of that too. And none of that is lost on me. So I think a lot of times when I do start to feel down, or maybe I'm lamenting too much and I'm spiraling in kind of this level of self-pity, what pulls me back out of that is gratitude, where I say, yeah, but you know what? Look where you are. Look where you are. And I could like recently, I'm just like, I just hate being at my dad's house because there's so much clutter around here, and it's busy everywhere I look. And so like for my mind, it's not good. But then I can look at it and be like, you know what though? I feel really grateful that I have the opportunity to be here, because like if I couldn't be here, where would I go?
Mm-hmm.
And what, and how would that be different? So this is, I have to stop myself from time to time when I start going down that rabbit hole of woe is me. It's like, nah, you know what? Things aren't so bad. There's a lot of shit going on in the world. And yes, understand it's okay to feel what you feel, right? And to express it, but then to counteract that, or at least balance out with a level of gratitude and a level of self-compassion and a level of patience as well. I kind of look at this idea of self-care on a continuum, I guess. Not on a continuum, but a spectrum. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, a spectrum. And there's selflessness and there's selfishness. And then in the middle is self-care. And to me, if you're overly selfless, you need to be more selfish from time to time in order to bring yourself back to self-care. And if you're always selfish, you need to be a little bit selfless in order to bring yourself back to, or express gratitude in order to bring yourself back to self-care. I don't necessarily think that being selfish is a bad thing. Too much selfishness is a bad thing, but too much selflessness is also a bad thing, because then you're really giving up who you are, and you're going into that people pleaser. So I try to balance those things as much as possible. And, like I said, because my mind moves so fast, this meditation practice, and I've been doing that for 10 years, it's really what brings me back to center and allows me to just kind of process where I am presently.
Oh, so interesting, isn't it? Because that spectrum can be relating to a lot of things, like different parts of life. So I was thinking there about the podcast, for example, that I do. When I spoke to my friend this week, one who was a guest last year, Katrina, she couldn't believe what I offered. So I get to review a lot of books, travel books, in exchange for interview. Now that is a lot. Cool. That is a lot of hours per episode, 16 to 20 hours, because you've got to read the book, edit the podcast, do the podcast, blah blah blah. And she's like, I can't believe you get nothing in return. I was like, yeah, sometimes they share it on social media, like the episode, sometimes not. She goes, no, this has got to stop. So I think in terms of the podcast, I'm definitely at the selflessness at that end there. I do a lot for people. I put a lot of hours in. I put a lot of content out there. I'm relentless, and don't get too much in return in terms of what I would consider, like, I don't know. I'm pretty happy with it. But speaking to her, she's like, no, you should be demanding more, because I think you're doing yourself a disservice. And then in real life, like, traveling this year is such a grateful position, and don't get me wrong, wouldn't never trade it for anything else. It's very lucky. Someone said to me today, you've done something in a year that people don't do in a lifetime. So yeah, okay. It's hard when you're in this phase now afterwards, when you're trying to find a job and stuff. But in terms of like real life, yeah, I've been quite selfish, because I'm like, last 10 years, no, I'm gonna live in this country, and then do all these things. So I've got this like trade-off here where almost like professionally I'm a bit selflessness. I'm like, I'm not selfish enough, but in personal life I'm probably too selfish. So I'm trying to like work out how to get them both in the middle.
Yeah.
Or swap even. I don't know. Yeah.
Right. I've long considered, so the first 100 episodes I had guests, right?
Yeah.
And like, I was just trying to build a content base. Yeah. So, really I was just like, please be on my show. But at the same time too, like, and you probably, like, I pitched you to be on the show. So I wanted to chat with you and wanted to talk to your audience. But, I get pitches and I'm like, I don't want to talk to this person.
Oh yeah.
The people that I want to talk to,
people
that I want to talk to, I reach out to and say, I want to talk to you. And so I'm kind of going into this mindset of, if somebody pitches me, I might say, yeah, you can be on my show, but since you reached out to me, like, it's going to cost you. You're going to have to pay to be on my show. I've talked to people about that, and they're like, yeah, that's a good idea. And some people said, no, that's a slippery slope that you're on. Right. So I don't know. So I have now just gone to doing solo episodes. I have my co-host Matt Hazard. So, because I did solo episodes for a while, and they just didn't have the same energy as when you're talking to somebody.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So I asked Matt, I'm like, hey, dude, do you want to be a guest? And like, just come be my co-host on this show, and we can, banter. And I told him, in exchange, you get free coaching. So I'll walk you through all the things that I do with my clients, and you get free coaching. He's like, yeah, that sounds great. So it's a lot of fun to have him on the show. But I have now, I guess, gone from the selflessness of having guests on the show and for free to featuring myself. So now I am featuring myself. I am the expert in the room. And you know, I like doing that, but at the same time too, I do miss having conversations with guests. And there's like a whole list of people that I want to talk to that like I would have to reach out to and say, will you please be a guest on my show? Like Adam Grant. I want Adam Grant to be on my show. But then there are people like Adam Grant or who you actually have to pay them
of course
to be on your show. And it's like, oh, well, I'm not at that stage yet.
Yeah. Tell me about it. Yeah. I'm at the same stage as you where you can say no. I'm definitely in that stage where I've had lots of pitches to be on, and I'm like, you just don't. It's a weird one when people pitch, because you're like, have you actually even listened or even read what this show's about? Because what you're pitching to talk about is absolutely nothing to do with what I'm talking about. So it's a strange one. So I said no to quite a lot of people. So don't get me wrong. Like maybe that's the first part of selfishness on this podcast. Is I think after 100 episodes, actually, probably this year. I think you're like 130. So yeah.
Thank you for accepting my request. So.
Like the pitch was great, and it is a travel show, but also there is a part of life to it. In terms of what you're pitching and what we're talking about now, but also I think that does intertwine with travel, because a lot of my listeners probably are either traveling or want to travel or have never traveled, right? But they're interested in how to do it, or maybe a bit needs some advice, like maybe they're stuck in a job in USA. A lot of US listeners, right? So do they have 2 weeks off a year? How can they maximize that? Like they don't like their job. Like I'm trying to see where that goes with helping those people out. But yeah, it has to be the right fit.
And I didn't grow up traveling either. Like my family, we took one vacation. We went to, when I was in 4th grade, we went to Florida, and we went to Disney World, Epcot Center, whatever. But I also sat through a timeshare meeting because that's how we got that trip. So there I am in 4th grade, sitting with my 2 sisters and my mom and dad through a timeshare meeting. Yeah. So that was the only vacation we took as a family. Otherwise, like I grew up on a farm. Now, admittedly, I didn't do much on the farm. I wasn't, my sisters will have never let me live that down. But, you know, when you're on the farm, you got.
This is a patron shout out to Laura from the Swamp Soup Stickers, who has contributed £5 to the podcast on my Patreon. Thank you so much for your support. Really appreciate it, and it helps the podcast to keep going in the future. If you're interested, head to the show notes where you'll find a link to my Patreon. The website address is patreon.com/Winging It Travel Podcast. For £5 English, you will receive some trendy stickers from myself in the post, a shout out on each episode, and also my digital travel planner by email. Thank you for your support.
You got cows that you got to milk every day. Like cows don't take a day off, so you really can't take a day off either. So my mom and dad just never could take a day off. We never traveled when I was growing up, and like my dad is very much like, why would I ever leave this town? Like this is, you know, I got everything I need here. So I didn't get a passport until I was 37. And the only reason why I got a passport is because my favorite band, Pearl Jam, was going to Europe.
Seattle.
And so I asked my girlfriend at the time, I was like, hey, do you want to go to Europe this summer for 2 weeks? And she's like, yeah, that sounds awesome. I said, okay, here's the thing. We're going to be following Pearl Jam around. She's like, that sounds fine. Let's do it. So we went for over 2 weeks, we went to like 6 different cities. And it was a lot of fun, and you know, that's kind of what sparked this wanderlust is to that trip right there. And all of my travel experiences, I don't think they really started until at least my 30s, but they all revolve around Pearl Jam. I've seen Pearl Jam 52 times in 9 countries. So there are a lot of states that are involved in that too. A lot of cities in the United States that I've visited just because Pearl Jam was going on.
Right.
But then I've also been to every Major League Baseball stadium. Okay. So that was a big bucket list item for me.
Yeah.
And then I've also paddleboarded all 5 Great Lakes. So those were like the big bucket list things for me.
Yeah.
was to, I wanted to get to 50 Pearl Jam shows. I've done that. Now I'd like to get to a 10th country to see him in a 10th country. I think that'd be cool. But then all the Major League Baseball stadiums and all of the Great Lakes. And now I want to paddleboard off the coast of every continent. So I've got 4 down, 3 left to go. So that's kind of my next phase. But, like I said, like I didn't grow up traveling. And then, when I was 37, I finally got my passport. And I'm like, okay. But the thing is, in the United States, it's such a big country.
Yeah, it's huge, isn't it?
But I think too, like I lived small. I worked in education, so I had my summers off. But I did teach summer school pretty much every summer because I was trying to save money. I was trying to make money. Mm-hmm. So then, I might have a month off here or something like that. Have my 4 weeks. So I live in Minnesota. Minnesota is winter 6 months out of the year.
Yeah, it's harsh.
So why would I ever want to leave June, July, August? Those are the best months of the year. So it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense to leave during that time. And I think because I lived small, that I thought small, to travel somewhere over winter break and not spend Christmas with my family. The first time I did that was 2019. Mm-hmm. So that was the first time that I had never spent Christmas with my family. And, I had 2 weeks of Christmas vacation at that time, winter break at that time. I could have gone somewhere warm to visit or just somewhere different to explore, but I didn't. And this idea of, hey, you've only lived in Minnesota your entire life. So this is the only lens through which you see the world. You need to get out and see more of the world. So then that's kind of when I formulated this plan in 2021 to, I had a dog and I didn't want to take the dog traveling because she was getting older. So I kind of said, as soon as she crosses the Rainbow Bridge, then I will make a plan to travel. So she passed away in 2020. And so then I had a whole school year to plan my travel. Now, originally I wanted to do the Asia circuit, but they weren't open because of COVID.
Yeah.
So I had to look like what's open and where do I want to go? And Portugal was number 3 on my bucket list. So it went Japan number 1, Korea number 2, Portugal number 3. And Portugal was open. So I spent 2 months in Portugal. Dream. And that is numero uno of countries. It is Lisbon is my favorite city. It's just absolutely stunning. Oh my goodness gracious. I've never seen bluer skies in my entire life. The way that the azulejos just shine off of the buildings and the tiles of orange and purple and yellow and blue, it's just incredible. It's just absolutely stunning. And in Porto, even though Porto is kind of run down, it is the most charming city I've ever visited.
Yeah.
It's so incredible. And then I went down to the Algarve as well. And I mean, you just have limestone cliffs overlooking the ocean. Yes, I'll take that. So yeah, it's just these really great experiences in 2021. And then I went to Spain for 2 weeks. And then I wanted to paddleboard off the coast of Africa, and I found this surf camp just off the coast of Dakar, Senegal. It's called Angor Island Surf Camp. And man, if you want to understand or if you want to challenge yourself or feel like, okay, I need some inspiration to live more boldly, hang out with surfers. Surfers are wild.
Yeah.
Surfers have no fear of anything.
I don't know how they do it.
Anything. It's incredible. And so I learned a lot just from, like I said, a pretty high anxiety. So traveling and getting to and from, particularly I didn't know much about Senegal. So that was a challenge to me that stretched my comfort zone. I don't like this idea of get outside your comfort zone. I can talk about that if you want, but this definitely stretched my comfort zone. And then just talking to those surfers, I was just in awe of how badass each and every single one of them were. It's so incredible. And men, women, it was just, I just looked at even like the women sometimes I was just like, oh my God, like,
Yeah.
you're such a badass. It's so attractive.
Honestly, surfers, when you see that place in Portugal, is it Nazare? I don't know if I pronounced that right.
Nazare, yeah.
Nazare.
Yeah, I
when you see
definitely would
them
like
do
to
them,
check that out.
I can't get my head around it. That is because I'm not great in water, so deep water scares me. I'm a bit fearful of that. So the thought that they just want to go and ride that wave, I have no idea what even goes through their mind.
Yeah, because they did like 20, 30 meters high, right? I'm trying to do the math in my head.
Yeah.
20, 30 meters high.
Yeah,
that's
crazy.
wild.
I'm actually off to Portugal in a few weeks. That's my last part of the trip. I'm going to Madeira for a week, and Madeira looks incredible.
Oh, yeah. Madeira and the Azores, right?
Yes.
Azure Islands. I'd like to check those out.
So in Europe, like during this winter time, most of the countries obviously in snow or cold weather. Southern Mediterranean, you might get mild weather, but if you want to go somewhere like warm to hot, you've got to go to like the Canary Islands for Spain, or the Azores or Madeira, Portugal, which is basically off Africa, really. But yeah, they look incredible, and it's cheap and off season, so cheap.
Yeah. I screwed up, and I'm going to Seoul for 2 months. So I'm,
Seoul's not cheap.
Well, actually, Seoul is cheap.
Is it?
Seoul
Okay.
is, for a major city. Seoul is probably the most affordable. When you think about, Mexico City, of course, very cheap. But I was not a fan of Mexico City, which I know is heresy to a lot of people.
Wow.
I know a lot of people who love Mexico City.
Yeah.
I was not a fan of it. If send all your hate mail to Billy at mindfulmidlifecrisis.com if you are all about Mexico City, and if you didn't like Mexico City and you want show your support and solidarity, send me a message there too. But no, Seoul is actually quite affordable.
Okay.
So in comparison to other major cities, Seoul's got 20 million people of it. So you think about all the other cities that have 10 to 20 million people. Seoul's one of the cheapest, and it's certainly, of those, far more developed. And you and I were talking about this misconception that Seoul has, that it's a boring city.
Boring place, yeah. Absolutely not.
No, it is incredible.
It's incredible. And I think it's just got that sort of, or I've seen them travel on social media, that sort of reputation, like when people go South Korea, like Seoul, oh yeah, it's just a bit like, oh, okay, well, we're going to check it out and let's have a look. And it's the opposite. It was definitely not boring.
Well, I think people view it as the redheaded stepchild to the perfect child of Tokyo, right?
Well, Tokyo's great as well. Yeah.
I think, I'm Seoul over Tokyo. I'm actually Osaka over Tokyo.
Oh, wow.
Osaka has
that's a crazy place.
People. They have the funniest people, because there's this decorum that you see in Tokyo, and it just doesn't exist in Osaka. They're so loud, they're so funny, they're so unruly. I love Osaka. And Kyoto is absolutely stunning. So yeah, I actually preferred those to Tokyo. Now, that might have been because I had just gotten to the end of this bouncing around and got to Tokyo, and I was just frazzled.
Mm-hmm.
So, but for me, I need water. I need there to be a body of water near me. And yes, Tokyo has, it has the body of water that's over there, but you kind of have to work to get to it. That was the thing with Mexico City for me, is what's weird is it's built on a lake, right? The aqueduct's underneath it, but you don't see it. Yeah. So it's just dry land and development. And I felt claustrophobic while I was there. So it wasn't, it just wasn't for me. It wasn't for me. And if I missed stuff, I also got sick while I was there. Montezuma's Revenge is alive and well. So that also, that impacted it. And I think too, I may have gotten altitude sickness, because you don't really realize just how high Mexico City is, but I'll say it's 7,500 feet. Now you think about Denver's a mile-high city. That's 5,200 feet. Yeah. So people can do the conversion rates here if they're listening overseas. I'm sorry, I've got American math with me, but I think that the altitude may have done me in a little bit. So
that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's that. But Seoul, people don't recognize don't realize, I didn't know this, just how rugged of a country Korea is. And there's so much hiking that you can do, and you just take the subway
Endless.
to the there's all these trails, all these mountains, and they're not giant mountains. They're like anywhere between 600 to 900 meters high in Seoul. If you want the higher ones, you can go to Soraksan, but you just take the subway and boom, you're in the mountains. A 45-minute subway ride and you are in the mountains. It's so easy to get out there. And then this beautiful river walk along the Han River. And then you get into like Cheonggyecheon, that the stream that's in the middle of the city.
Yeah, that's a great little walk, isn't it?
It's so quiet down there. Seoul is amazing. If people are out there and they're like, I've thought about going to Seoul, what should I check out? Please message me, because I'll get on a Zoom call with you. And if you go out there between December and January, I'll meet you in Seoul, and I'll show you around. I'll show you to all my favorite spots. I'll take you away from the touristy stuff, because anybody can find that. I love Seoul. I absolutely love it. And I love showing people that city. My dream job would be a tour guide if I could. The
Seoul Travel Board, if they're listening.
I love it.
Yes. Can we just have a job?
Yes, exactly. I would love it. And you know what? I am connected to them like remotely. So when I go back there, I may have to be like, listen, I'm very passionate about your city. I'm very passionate about showing people your city. Can I show around English speaking visitors? I would love that because then I could get a visa and stay there.
Honestly, it's got to be up there. One of my favorite cities this year. Probably definitely top 3 and of all time. I was so surprised by it.
Yeah, that makes me happy, because I one of the nicest things anyone has ever said to me is, Billy, when you're excited about something, you want everybody else to be excited about it too. So I want people to be excited about Seoul. So I love that you love Seoul too.
Yeah, and it was not even planned. It was only picked because. Oh God, hang on. I'm too excited. It's only picked because it's the cheapest place to fly over the water to Vancouver, right?
Right.
Tokyo was too expensive. Bangkok, Singapore, very expensive. But Seoul was the most reasonable one, I think, that I would say. So I think, okay, we'll check it out. But my word, what a great decision that was.
Yeah. How long did you spend there?
I think we spent 6-7 days in Seoul, and then 3 or 4 in Busan. Busan only because they have a beach, right? Busan's got the beaches, great weather down there. Yeah, very, very chilled. So we watched a different aspect of South Korea.
Excellent. So, I always like asking this question to people who travel a lot. And, to me, I think Mexico City is pretty overrated. I also think Barcelona is fairly overrated. Do you have any overrated cities that
okay. This is a great conversation. Let's do it. Because my podcast is all about good stuff, right? And I get it. I need to spread a good message, but there's some places I don't like. And I'll give you 3 or 4 overrated, or places I didn't like. Now, the one I get the most heat about is Bali. I cannot stand the place.
Okay.
You said about all the haters for Seoul or whoever, like, go to you. Bali, come to me. I did not like that place. And I don't really like what digital nomads are doing to it. So it's a very passionate dislike, not of the Balinese, but of the way that people like me are going there and just changing the landscape. I don't think it's great. Barcelona, I like the city, but it's not as amazing as people say, because I felt I felt 2 things happened in Barcelona which were really weird. On the beach, I was hassled, which is quite popular for, I guess, beach destinations. And they obviously realised I was English, and they said to me, do you want to buy this bracelet or whatever? I said, no. And I think he just said, well, if you don't, I'm going to kill your family. I'm like, oh, wow, okay. That's interesting. And then in Las Ramblas, there's a group just there, and the police were there. And someone said that there's a gun, and you heard these like ricochets. I don't think it was bullets, but it sounded like it, and people were just running to the shops. That was a weird experience. And That's a bit strange. And then I just think Barcelona is great if you get into the less touristy spots, if you can sort of find those little streets and keep away from those like areas. I don't know. I just felt a bit unsafe, actually, if I'm honest. So there too. I bet how controversial can I go here? Regina or Winnipeg in Canada?
I've never been, so I don't have an opinion.
Very don't hate them, but don't love them for sure. And Sao Paulo, I didn't like in Brazil.
Okay. I haven't been to South America yet, so that's one of the continents that I'm looking forward to visiting at some point in time. I'd like to paddleboard off the coast of Cartagena, and I'd like I think just kind of doing the circuit of Peru, and then over to Argentina, and then I have a friend that's actually in January going to Patagonia, and then taking the cruise to Antarctica.
Oh yeah,
and I'm like,
from Ushuaia,
awesome. Right? Yeah. That's so wild. So excited to see those adventures unfold for her. But she travels. So it's really cool. But I mean, she's very intentional. So I think, kind of going back to what we were talking about before, like, she works really, really hard, and then when these big opportunities come up for her to do she's hiked Kilimanjaro. So she was in Africa for like 2-3 weeks, I think, and did like an Alaskan trek one time. And now she's doing like this month-long trip. So, but she's really intentional about, okay, I'm going to work really hard. She does hair, so she makes sure that her appointments are set up and taken care of ahead of time. And then she does these trips. So it's, I think there is a way to balance it. Now I can't remember. I think it was an episode with Adam Grant on his podcast where they talked about that it's actually healthier for us to take like a 1 or 2 week vacation every 2 months than it is to take like a long month or 2 month long vacation all at one shot. So it's actually, just that those moments of spreading out those vacations,
I agree,
are really, really crucial.
That's tough though, right? Because in the real world, like, who gets, I don't know, 6, 7 weeks, 8 weeks? Because like where you're from, right? People get 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think. I mean, it's generally 4. So I think most people get about 4 weeks of vacation.
Okay.
Yeah, 2 to 4 weeks vacation. I think people get in the United States. You know what? I haven't worked in corporate America, so I'm kind of I worked in school, and so people were like, "Oh, teachers never work," and it's like, well, there is I have to deal with your shitty kids. That's why they give me the summers off. So.
Can we touch on that very quickly? Why?
Sure.
You mentioned why you left, but like, how did you come to the decision to quit your career after 20 years, I think it was, to put a plan in place to leave that job? Because I assume that you're very good at it, you knew it, but obviously there must have been something personally that you just felt you had to leave it. There must have been a big decision, and how did you plan for that?
Well, there wasn't really a plan. Like I said, it just wasn't going to be a way for me to transition back to that position after I had traveled around for that time. I had experienced, when you're the dean of students, nobody likes the dean of students. So you're always the bad guy. You're always the bad guy. I was always delivering bad news. Students hated me because I suspended them. Teachers hated me because I didn't suspend a student when they thought they should have been suspended. And then parents, they're advocating for their kids, and they can't see things objectively. So they sometimes they lash out. Right. So I was always the bad guy, and I was the subject of some pretty nasty social media harassment, to the point that I actually had to involve the police because this was running rampant. So, it was just, it was time for me to go.
And was that the students, are they sort of like, I know we have different grades and stuff compared to the UK and the way you word it?
14 to 18 years old.
Okay, so they're high school. They're not like post-secondary university.
No, this is 14 to 18 years old. So, so we would call freshmen our 14 to 15-year-olds.
Okay.
And that's, particularly 14 to 15-year-old boys, man, that is an interesting breed. Like 14 to 15-year-old boys should, it's Lord of the Flies. That's what it is. It's Lord of the Flies. So, I'm happy that I wasn't stabbed with a spear or had a giant boulder dropped on my head at some point in time. And I joke about that, but there were days that when I walked into the building, that I thought I might not come out, and people were really, really, students were really upset about one thing or another because they got a consequence. And so being the dean of students, a lot of it got projected towards me. And, there were, like I said, there were days that I was nervous, like, well, am I going to come back out of the building here today? And I knew, like, we had to do active shooter drills, and that was second nature. Like, I coordinated the active shooter drills. Wow. But I also knew there were 2 spots in the building and that I had keys to, that if an active shooter came into the building, I would go to those spots. And I was there were one of 3 people who knew where those spots were. Mm-hmm. So that's where I was heading. So, it's and listen, like I had a lot of great experiences working in education too, but by that point in time, I had just burned out, and I wasn't a big thing for me is surrounding yourself with the people who amplify the work that you're doing. And I had amazing colleagues, but when you're, like I said, when you're always the bad guy, it's tough for students to kind of buy into what you're doing. Like I would have to sit down and have really hard conversations with students about, hey, right, you've got 15 missing assignments, so let's sit down and create a plan to get some of these turned in so that you can earn credit for this class. And some of it's stuff that I do with my clients. It's just saying, hey, we got to prioritize here. What does that look like? Where can we instill some discipline, some structure, some consistency, so that we can get to where it is that we want to go? Now, with my clients, they've come to me and said, hey, I would like to work with you because I like what you say. I like how you say it. My students, I would come to them and say, hey, we need to have a conversation. And if they didn't like who I was, and I think the reality is, I think people are like, well, if you're a good teacher, you're a good teacher. I have worked with some of the best teachers, and there are students who are just like, I didn't like that teacher. And it's like, how could you not like that teacher? They're absolutely amazing. And I mean, you know who you get along with and who you don't get along with. Some people you just jive with, some people you synergize with. Mm-hmm. And, when it came to constantly delivering bad news, that, I think people dreaded if they saw, it was Mr. Lahr. They walked in already in a bad mood. So then how do you de-escalate that? I would call up parents and they'd be like, now what did he do? And it's like, I'm actually calling to tell you that he did something good. Like, because I think we should balance it out here. So I would want you to know that your son did something worthwhile today that it makes me want to call you and say, hey, tell them they did a good job. So they're like, oh, okay. What else is going on? It's like, nothing. There's no ulterior motive other than to tell you that they did a good job. So yeah, it's just, kind of navigating those situations, but
it's tough.
Hey, just a quick one. I just want to say there are many ways to support this podcast. You can buy me a coffee and help support the podcast with $5, or you can go to my merch store with the affiliate link with TeePublic, where there's plenty of merch available to buy, such as t-shirts, jumpers, hoodies, and also some children's clothing. Thirdly, which is free, you can also rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, or Good Pods. Also, you can find me on social media on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. Simply just search for Winging It Travel Podcast, and you'll find me displaying all my social media content for traveling, podcast, and other stuff. Thank you.
I'm through that now and just kind of processing how that went. And I thought about, as we talked about before, if I go back into education, is that a loss? And maybe it's just the change of scenery. It could very well just be a change of scenery.
Yeah.
And that might shed new light or provide new experiences. So and again, being open to that, because if I go in bitter,
absolutely,
then that's going to be palpable, and those students are going to feel that bitterness, and they're going to be like, he doesn't want to be here. Well, then I don't want to be here. So managing that, and again, that's a lot where that meditation practice comes into play and has really benefited me over the years.
So when you left that role and travel has now come into your psyche, what were you thinking in terms of just like places to go to or experiences to experience? Did you have anything in your mind that's always been there, like, one day I'd like to do this? Or is it really off the cuff, or did you spend 2 months just planning things out? Like, how did you approach the next phase?
No, I was really intentional around it. So the original plan was to hit my top countries. So I wanted to do Japan, I wanted to do Korea, and I wanted to do Thailand. So I could do, those were 3 of the 4 top countries that I wanted to visit.
Yeah.
So I was hoping that I was going to be able to do that. And then with COVID, I just wasn't able to do it. So I did Portugal first. And so that was, that was well thought out. And I'm like, well, if I'm over here, I might as well go to Spain and check out some parts of Spain too. And then I did some research. I'm like, is there a way I can get to Senegal from Madrid? And there was, and it was quite affordable. So I did that. So, and those were all, again, very intentional. I wanted to paddleboard off the coast of Africa. Boom. I did it. I paddleboarded off the coast of Europe while I was there. So then when I came back to the States and kind of regrouped for a while and went out to Seattle to visit my sister. And I was there for a month, and I took a road trip to Oregon. Stunning.
Harris Beach behind me. It's Harris Beach.
Yeah. So Seaside, Oregon. I hate even saying this because I want it to be my secret spot. Seaside, Oregon is incredible.
Dreamy.
Park your car on the beach and just watch the sunset. It's just beautiful. And then Seaside has these cute little restaurants and stores. No lie, the best food that I have eaten in the last 2 years has been in Seaside, Oregon. It was so good. It was so good. Seaside is just a top-notch spot. And then went to Portland for a couple of days. We don't need to talk about that. But sorry, Portlandia. But then when I got back, Thailand was they were changing their COVID rules. And so then they were saying you can't come in if you can't come in after January 15th. Well, I was going to be there January 25th. And I'm like, ugh. And then they said, okay, you might be able to come in on January 15th. And I'm like, if you're changing your mind this much, this is just too much of a hassle. So I canceled my flight, and I literally Googled mountains, warm weather, ocean, cheap metro transit. So I typed those 5 words into Google, and Puerto Vallarta, Mexico popped up.
Okay. Yeah.
I was like, oh, all right. So I went to Puerto Vallarta for a month. Loved it. Puerto Vallarta is just an adventure land. If you like adventure, if you like hiking, if you like zip lining, if you like the ocean, if you like warm weather, I did these 2 taco tours that were incredible there. Puerto Vallarta. So I'm not dissing all of Mexico. Puerto Vallarta is amazing. And I think that's often overlooked because people will go to like Oaxaca, or they'll go to the Yucatan area with Cancun and that sort of, no, Puerto Vallarta. And people like Cabo, Puerto Vallarta. love PV. So I went there for a month, and then I came back to the States, and that was when Korea announced that they were opening up to tourists. So the next day I booked my flight to Korea because I'm like, here it is. Let's go. Let's make it happen. And I was planning on spending a month in Seoul. So I did that. And interesting, I didn't like Seoul the first 10 days that I was there.
Ah,
It was hard because I was really the only tourist there.
yeah.
And it was, just the language barrier was really difficult. And people on the subway were quiet. They looked straight ahead. Nobody was talking on there. So it felt really sterile and cold. But then I met this group called Soul Share, and it's just this group of hikers, and it has shifted the course of my life. So shout out
Wow.
to Soul Share. Seoul has an amazing meetup community. So
Okay.
if you are going to visit Seoul for a week, check out their meetup community. I highly recommend Soul Share. It's all one word, Soul Share, and it's Seoul like the city. They're on Instagram. Give them a follow. Tell them Billy sent you. I actually organize events for them right now because that's how much indebted I am to them.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was there for a month and I loved it so much that when I went to Jeju for 10 days. That while I was there, I'm like, I think I'm going to extend my time in Seoul. So I changed my flight. I booked an Airbnb. I went to Busan for a week. I went to Gangneung, which is the East Coast.
Okay.
It's basically the California coast because you've got the beaches there, the ocean, and behind you have Seoraksan National Park where you can go hiking. It's incredible. Beautiful, beautiful area. And then I went back to Seoul for a month. And like I said, I loved it so much that I was like, okay, I'm going to go back. I'm going to sell my stuff. I went back to Seoul for 3 months. While I was over there, I'm like, well, since I'm here, I might as well go to Thailand. So I went to Thailand, and I had always wanted to visit Singapore. So I did a week in Singapore. And I was looking at, well, when should I go to Japan? And I had 2 weeks at the end of February, and I'm like, it's going to be cold in Japan. So what about Vietnam? So I went to Vietnam for 2 weeks. So that was kind of winging it. That was me winging it.
On brand.
Yeah. But then when I got to Japan, it was the beginning of March, and I was in Osaka for 3 weeks. And then when I got to Kyoto, it was cherry blossom season.
There you go. Yeah.
Cherry blossom season in Kyoto was a bucket list for me. Oh, just beautiful. So that was a lot of fun. And then I wanted to go somewhere where it wasn't super touristy. So I went to Kanazawa, and that was a really cool experience. And then Tokyo, and then I went back to Seoul for another 2 months, and now been in Minnesota since July. And
okay, that's a big stint.
So I went 2 weeks. I was going to spend a month in Mexico City, but like I said, it just wasn't my jam. So I went for 2 weeks, and then I came back. And when I came back, I'm like, I don't want to stay at my dad's long, but I also don't want to stay in the States because it's really expensive here, and I need a car and yada, yada, yada. I'm like, why don't I just go back to Seoul? So there we go. So next week I'm heading back to Seoul, and then I'm like, well, life is cheap in Chiang Mai. Life is cheap in Hanoi. I know people there.
Yeah.
So like I said, a lot of this is about creating more stability in my life and connecting with people who I had met during my travels who enriched my life in some way, because community is really, really important, especially if you're a solo traveler.
Yeah. And I want to touch on USA being expensive, because I think a lot of people would listen or expect like it's cheap. I thought that probably before I came to Canada 4 or 5 years ago. I was like, I'm going to USA, it's going to be cheap. It's like $1 food. It really is expensive. And it's kind of shocked me over time, last 4 or 5 years. And then on this road trip for a couple of months, that apart from gas, which is actually quite cheap compared to the rest of the world, everything else is quite expensive. Maybe on groceries and Walmart is quite cheap, but everything else, like eating out, for example, or going for it's just really expensive. Like, how has that changed recently, do you think? Or has that always been the case? Because I think a lot of people would think, oh, yeah, America's cheap, go there.
So here's the thing. I think I'm more aware of it now that I have traveled to more affordable countries.
Okay.
Portugal is fairly cheap. Spain is fairly cheap. Seoul was fairly cheap. And then you go to Thailand, you go to Hanoi, and it was like, you feel like a millionaire.
Yeah.
Right. So I think, but then I went to Singapore and I'm like, oh yeah, things are pretty expensive here.
I'm poor. Yeah.
But you can, if you go to Singapore and if you eat out at the hawker centers,
Yes.
it's actually quite cheap
to
to eat there. But a hotel or Airbnb in Singapore is pretty expensive. Same within the States. Hotels and Airbnbs, I have found to be really expensive. Now, some people might be like, well, why don't you just stay in a hostel? Because I'm 46. And I also record a podcast, so I can't have a lot of noise around me. Like I get my dad upstairs vacuuming, and he's got Fox News on at stadium level the entire time. So it's like, so I have to go upstairs and tell him, hey, I need you to turn that down. I'm recording right now. So I can't imagine having 20 something, having 10, 20 somethings. And even if I had a private room, right, there's going to be noise and the communal kitchen thing, even though where I'm staying in Seoul has a communal kitchen, it's a really, really, really nice communal kitchen. And it's not like, usually there's no one down there cooking. So I'm not a big hostel guy. I like having my own space. So could I have traveled more affordably anywhere I went? Yes, I could have, but at what cost to like my own enjoyment? Right?
Yeah, that's the thing, right?
And people were like, well, you could have met people that way. Yeah, but I'm pretty good about meeting people when I'm out. Like my trick is if I hear English, I kind of just insert myself into the conversation. I'm like, oh, hey, where are you guys from? Da 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 da. So I'm able to, and I'm a good read of character too. If people like go away from me, stupid guy, then I'm not gonna continue on with them. But if they're willing to engage me in conversation and invite me into their group, then I'll join with them. That's why I like doing tours. There's all these free walking tours everywhere you go around the world. They're fantastic, and a lot of times you meet people, and sometimes they're just your friends for the day, but sometimes they're like, hey, let's go and do this. When I was in Lisbon, I met a very lovely couple, a Brazilian couple who live in Miami, and they were like, yeah, let's go hang out. And they were fantastic. So I've met some of my best friends that way while traveling, is just inserting myself into the conversation and saying, hey, where are you guys from? And just eliciting that traveling conversation from there. And I think travelers, I think a lot of travelers appreciate knowing who else is traveling as well, who else is having that experience. That might be an assumption, but that's kind of the takeaway that I've had in the last 2 years.
I think people who realize that they're doing also longer travel, not just like vacation, because you quickly go off within 2 weeks or a week, right? But yeah, I think when you start to realize, oh, they're doing the same thing as me, I think we do gravitate towards each other because you can relate to the challenges as well as the good parts, can't you?
And another thing too is like, I'm a single guy, so I use dating apps when I travel somewhere, and sometimes it's to find a little bit of romance, and sometimes it's like you meet somebody, but you're like, oh, there's not like a romantic connection here, but you're super cool. Like one of my best friends that I met in Lisbon, we met on Tinder, and we hung out, and we're like, oh, there's like nothing romantic that's here, but you're super cool, and let's hang out. So we ended up hanging out, and then I met this Italian dude who lives in Sweden. So he and I were hanging out, and I'm like, you need to meet my friend Carla who lives here. So the three of us would hang out.
Yeah.
And like a couple months ago, we had a Zoom chat because we just all caught up because we were like, what's up with everybody? Like, how are you guys? And like Chiro, he bought a house in Puglia, Italy, and he's like, I'm remodeling it right now. You guys need to come down next summer when it's all done. Okay, that sounds awesome. I'm so glad that I made friends with you when I was walking back to the train station and I overheard you speaking English with somebody. It's just those kind of situations that you find yourself in. And I think that's, and maybe, and I'm sure there's probably introverts out there who are like, ugh. But I also, as someone who's an extrovert who likes to connect with people, to me, that I have found that the best experiences are when I share those experiences with others. I've had a lot of fun experiences on my own, but I've had a lot of amazing experiences when sharing in those experiences with others. And so, I mean, it's kind of, you know, whatever flips your minnow, as we would say here in Minnesota, you know, whatever floats your boat. And for me, I like making those connections, but I also try to be genuine about it too. You know, I'm not trying to be slimy. I'm not trying to be swarmy about it. If you don't want to hang out, I got it. We don't need to hang out. But if you seem cool, then and you want to go, like Chiro and I would go to different coastlines in Portugal, and like those are some of our best memories from that Portugal trip. And so I'm so grateful that he and I connected while we were walking back to the train station, because if I had just not made that connection, like there were a lot of things that he showed me in Portugal or in Lisbon, excuse me, that I had never heard of, that I didn't know about. And those were some of my favorite days, just because like it challenged me to get beyond just Lisbon. So I would cross the river and I would go to Costa de Caparica, and I went to Cimbrosa, and we went to Cabo de Especial. Like had I not done those things, I went to Troia. Had he not talked to me about those, I don't know that I would have done that. So I think that's the beauty of connecting with others, is that they introduce you to new experiences and new opportunities that maybe you wouldn't have thought of before. And then it's like, oh yeah, I want to try that. And that's the beauty of curiosity, and that's the beauty of connection.
Yeah. Always say yes, I think, is what I have said in the podcast, because I think if you go traveling and you say no to a lot of things, it's quite kind of counterintuitive. I think you're there to experience things and people, right? So the fact that people would turn up, and then if someone like a local or whatever offers you an experience, you're like, nah. Well, I can see it. You might be introverted, but that's quite a weird way to go about it. So I think people, if they get themselves out there and say yes to things, even if they don't like it, it's okay. You tried it. Don't need to do it again. But like, there's got to be some good sides to it, because you get to see new places, meet a new person, have a new contact, whatever. There's got to be an upside to it, at the very least, that you just at least tried it.
Well, I'll tell you something that I said no to, and then months later I said yes to.
Okay.
So within the first week that I was in Portugal. So this is the first week of this 2-year excursion that I'm on.
Yeah.
And I had matched with a woman on Tinder, and she's very attractive, but she was very forward. And she said, "Do you want to go for a car ride tomorrow?" And I'm like, no, we have not met.
Yeah. That's quite forward.
Yeah. And so I'm like, no, let's, like, we can hang out, but let's like go for a walk somewhere. And she's like, okay. She's like, are you afraid I'm going to abduct you? And I'm like, we're probably not going to, just on the off chance, you know? So we hung out. We had a very lovely time, and she now lives in Iceland. So she's like, come visit me in Iceland. Yeah. Well, anytime. Yeah. But then months later, when I was on Jeju Island, you know, there's not a lot to see on the west coast of Jeju Island.
Okay.
And so I had taken the bus around the east coast and the south. And so again, I had met a woman on Tinder, and she was a teacher. And so we had chatted, and she said, well, I'm going to be in Jeju City where I was. She said, I'm going to be in Jeju City. Do you want to go for a road trip on the West Coast, since you haven't seen that? And so by that time I had so many positive experiences with people that I'm like, oh yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So sure enough, she picked me up. We hit a couple of beaches that were absolutely stunning on the west coast and then we got down to the south coast, because Jeju Island, you can drive or circle in that in maybe 2 hours. Like, it doesn't take long for you to get all the way around Jeju Island. So we did a little road trip. We got to the south end, and then she said, okay, well, I live over here. Here's the bus stop. You're going to take that to Jeju City. It'll take you about an hour and a half to get there. And I was like, thank you very much. So I got on the bus, and it was a really lovely experience. So, and thank God that I had said yes to that, because had I not, then there would have been a whole coast a Jeju city that I had never seen, these beautiful beaches that I had never seen, a couple of hiking trails that I would have missed out on. She worked in Global Education City, which is like, it's kind of like all these school campuses down there. So she showed me all the school campuses, and they are state-of-the-art facilities. It was incredible. So I was like, oh, the teacher in me was kind of nerding out on that. And so we just had a nice time. And she's like, all right, here you go. Get on the bus and head back. I was like, perfect. All right. What a great way to spend the day. And so it's just, it's those moments like that where if you are cautious, but then, you take a calculated risk. And it was a lot of fun. I've had a lot of fun experiences like that. And I think that, like I said, that's the beauty of making connections with people.
Absolutely. Which kind of brings us on to your podcast and your brand. First of all, what should we go with the podcast? Can you tell people what you do on the podcast, what you talk about, and how it is designed to help people?
Yeah, it's called the Mindful Midlife Crisis. It's a podcast for people navigating the complexities and possibilities of life's second half. And I use strategies from what I call my no BS GPS guide to purpose and passion. And people are like, well, wait, you said don't follow your passions. Right. I have a formula that I share with my clients, and that circumnavigates that avoids that logic. So it's very sequential. So we talk about your understanding your strengths, weaknesses, and needs. And then from there, we explore your curiosities through mindfulness-based strategies. And then I help you find a community that can help you elaborate on the experiences that those curiosities can afford to you. So then to me, that equals purpose. Then we understand what our purpose is. So then how do we turn purpose into passion? We multiply that by consistency, discipline, patience, and self-compassion. So then that turns into passion. So the guests that I have on, I think, for the first 100 episodes, a lot of it was just kind of helping people. We talk about imposter syndrome. We talk about social emotional growth. We talk about diversity. We talk about parenting. We talk about relationships. We talk about communication. So I have these experts come on and share their expertise with the listeners. And if anybody needs a place to start, you can go to www.mindfulmidlifecrisis.com, and under podcast, you can click fan faves. So that way you don't have to wade through all the episodes, because I'm not going to lie, not all of them are good. So the fan faves are the episodes that have received the most recognition, so people can check that out. But nowadays I'm doing, more solo episodes and being very vulnerable about my experiences with anxiety and my struggles with my own mental health and how I've navigated that. And it's not all sunshines and rainbows. So, I talk about having a near debilitating anxiety attack when I was in Shanghai because I didn't want to rent a scooter, because I had never rented a scooter before, and I had never driven in a foreign country, and I'd never driven on the opposite side of the road. So I was paralyzed by this fear. And so it stopped me from renting a scooter for like 2 days. And then finally on the third day, it was just kind of like this, okay, all right, I'm going to do it. But it was after a couple hours of, again, still that debilitating fear. So it's just sharing those experiences, right? And letting people know that you are not alone in your experience, that whatever you're going through, it's normal, that you are having that feelings of doubt, feelings of remorse, feelings of regret, those things are normal. So this whole idea of live life with no regrets, that's nonsense. That's expecting you to live perfectly. Yeah. So the thing is, regret is an amazing teacher. If you don't wallow in regret and you look at, listen, do I regret? Maybe I'll tell you this. I regretted leaving Puerto Vallarta after 3 weeks. I should have stayed there another 3 weeks. So I did not make that same mistake when I had that same feeling about soul. So when I had that same feeling about soul, I extended my trip. Yeah. So it's about listening to your gut, right? And how we can do a better job of that. But then also I walk people through how to live with more joy and how to sit with joy, because we're taught how to handle difficult emotions, but we're not ever taught how to sit with happiness and how to relish joyful moments, how to really appreciate and be present with those joyful moments. So I talk a lot about that as well, because this idea of get outside your comfort zone drives me nuts, because why are we trying to get people outside of their comfort zone all the freaking time? Like, can't I just enjoy life where I am and be present with where I am, and treat comfort zone sort of like pizza dough, where we expand pizza dough. So we expand our comfort zone from within, and we recognize where the dough is getting thin. So then we put a little more dough, we put a little more flour in that spot, and people can use whatever metaphor they want for that. But what we want to be mindful of is when we start approaching a complacent zone.
Yeah.
So enjoy your comfort zone, people. I'm telling you now, go ahead and enjoy your comfort zone. But when comfort starts to transition into complacency, that's when you need to take some calculated action, some intentional action. And that's where I come in. So if people don't know where to start, I love doing that. And I love having free call. Like, I do a free call. I love having those. I just had a call the other day with somebody, and we just kind of outlined, hey, what is it where do you want to be? And how long are you okay with living with where you are right now? Because where you are right now is a means to an end if we are able to see it as such. But we can move forward as long as we understand where we are right now. What skills do we possess? What weaknesses are getting in our way? What are some needs that we need addressed? What are you curious about? And who are the people who can, accent that those curiosities, who can amplify those curiosities, who can provide you with opportunities to explore those curiosities. And then from there, we can work in kind of the structure and the routine. Because I like structure, I like routine, especially if you are a digital nomad. Like, it's really easy to just to not be in a structure and not be in a routine, and just say, well, I'm just going to go hike today, and I'm going to go hike tomorrow, and I'm going to sit at the beach the next day. But then if you got work that you need to do, when do you schedule that in? So that's where that discipline comes in. That's where that structure, that's routine comes in, and letting go of some FOMO. And I'll be the first to tell you that letting go of FOMO is my biggest area that I need to improve, is just letting go of FOMO. But again, I think the awareness of, okay, I feel like I'm missing out on something right now, but what's here? What's in this moment now? And just kind of coming back to that.
And do you think, we're keen to get your interest in this, do you think that people use travel as a way to rectify those problems when actually in real terms it doesn't, personally? Because we want experiences, but let's say you're really struggling. I've been guilty of this, and I think going away for 6 months is going to solve everything because I feel this way now, but come 6 months time, got to go back, and it's going to be the same thing again, right? Starts all over again. So do you think sometimes people use travel as a way to, again, I don't like the term find yourself, and they try and find themselves and then end up actually not finding anything about themselves? They have a great experience for 6 months, but then come back to the same position. Do you think people are a bit guilty of romanticizing travel to help you in your personal life?
Yeah. Thanks, Eat, Pray, Love.
Right?
People ask me all the time, is this your Eat, Pray, Love? No, because I hate that book. I think it's ridiculous. Now, if people want a book that it kind of covers what we were just talking about here, there's a book called Leave Only Footprints, and I think it's by Connor Knighton. It's beautiful. Basically, he went and visited all of the national parks in the United States within 1 year. But it's very reflective. and it's not nearly as pretentious as Eat, Pray, Love. But I think what happens is people forget that wherever you go, there you are. So I mean, you can travel overseas, but if you're carrying that baggage that you have, that emotional baggage that you have not processed, and here's the thing, sometimes a change of scenery is what you need in order to process it. Sometimes you just need to get away from whatever that toxic place is, right? You just need a break from it, or you need to be forever away from it, right? So you seeing me, so maybe you go somewhere and you see it differently. But then I think that's where that intentionality comes around, where it's like, are you just filling the day with events and not taking time to sit in reflection? And I'm guilty of that, because for a lot of this travel is filling the day with events. So now I'm trying to spend more time in reflection and understanding, like, what is my motivation for going here? What is my motivation for going here? And not necessarily what my intention is, because my intention for this travel is just basically to get in adventures and meet people. And I've been doing that. But then in doing those two things, those experiences have enriched my personal growth, right? Now, could I have enriched my personal growth even more had I journaled, or had I was doing therapy, and I think anybody who is for the first year, I didn't do therapy. In the second year I did. I think one of my biggest regrets in that first year was not doing therapy or not working with some sort of coach in some capacity to help me process what was going on, because I was in all these new places, but I was bringing the old problems in my mind with me.
Yeah.
So it was really difficult for me to be present in these amazing places, because I had all these thoughts that I had brought over the ocean with me. Now, so I think people need to be mindful of, if you're going to do something like this, what is your motivation? What is it that you want to get out of this? In episode 36 of our podcast, we talked to Dr. Yvette Erasmus about exploring or finding yourself through journey, right, and self-exploration. And she asked me, what's your motivation? What is it that you want to get out of this trip? And I think my response was just something like I want to dance again. Like I've had so many scrutinizing eyes on me from students, judging that there's little t trauma that's from that I didn't feel like I got to live out loud. And so, I like being a fool. I like dancing around. I like being silly. But I felt like I couldn't be any of those things for a long time. And so I'm trying to get back to that. And that's why I love Soul so much, because that community allows me to be my authentic self, which is a word. The authentic self, it makes me want to puke every time someone says it. But I get to be my genuine, authentic self in those moments, and I'm accepted for it. And to me, I think that maybe is the motivation. Like find, and it doesn't necessarily need to be external, but you find a group of people, you find some experiences that shape who you are, but then you take time to reflect on how those experiences and how those people have shaped who you are. The podcast serves as therapy for me, because I talk about the people that I meet and I talk about the experiences that I've had. So if you're going to do that trip, I think absolutely have fun. First and foremost.
Yeah. Fun's key.
Fun.
Yeah.
Have fun. But then also spend some time in reflection and create a time to do that. And it doesn't have to be a journal. It doesn't have to be a vlog. It can just simply be present with what is coming up for you, because then you can be more mindful of what you're bringing into that day's experience.
Mm-hmm.
And do that a couple times. It could be a 5-minute check-in. If you are on a subway, that's a perfect time. Take the earbuds out and just be present with what is while you're on the subway. And that's something that I've done more and more in Seoul. Seoul provides a lot of opportunities because there's a lot of metro transit there. So Seoul provides a lot of opportunities for me to simply be on the subway and be present with what is as I'm going to, whatever event or whatever thing that if it's a hike or something like that, if I'm meeting up with friends, what am I bringing with me in that moment? And then I can process through that and just say, all right, now that I've kind of had this, maybe this catharsis, and sometimes the catharsis is tears, right? Like sometimes the catharsis is tears, but then you have that catharsis and it's a lightening of the emotional load where you are then able to be present and you are able to be truly engaged in what is without having your mind be a distraction, because your mind is already a distraction enough. So how do we be intentional around being mindful? And it takes practice, and it, like I said, it takes intentionality. Everybody drink every time I say intentional in this episode.
Do you know the weirdest and most unique aspect of like this type of thing that I've heard is I interviewed an author who spent time with extreme travelers, and I asked him, I said, these extreme travelers who want to go to every country in the world, now on the face of it seems quite shallow. It's a competition. They're trying to go bam, 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 bam. And I was like, and I said to him, how do they do it? And how do they keep sane? And he says, it's because they love home. And it's like, it's a bit of a mind fuck. Well, they love home, but they're always out going to different countries. It is, yes, but they come back to where they live. A lot of them are Americans, so they come back to the house and they love being at home. He said that skill alone, it means they're not always doing it for, I guess, to a degree, the sake of it, if you exclude the competition out of it, because they go to a country or two countries for a trip, come back, and they love staying at home for a couple of weeks or 3 weeks or a month, and they'll go off again. So that's a bit of a weird way of, I know these guys are extreme, but like, they can come back and love where they are in normal life, yet they still go out and travel like 10 countries a year. But yeah, just an interesting take.
Well, no, I love that. That really hit hard for me because Minnesota doesn't feel like home anymore. So Seoul feels like home.
Mm-hmm.
So as you're saying that, there is a joy in going back to Seoul.
Yeah.
But it also reminds me in that Roadrunner documentary of Anthony Bourdain, and he's talking to Josh Homme from the Queens of the Stone Age.
Yeah.
And Josh says, there's nothing better than coming home, and there's nothing better than leaving home, the bittersweet curse.
Yeah.
And it couldn't be, I think that speaks exactly to what you were just talking about right there. But yeah, I think that's that's sort of the thing, is that, like, for me, Minnesota doesn't feel like home anymore. The United States doesn't feel like home anymore.
Now, in the real world, this is difficult because it's all based on visas, passports, etc. In a fantasy world where there's no borders and you can go anywhere, I'd imagine a lot of people would go to where they feel the most comfortable, and that view is obviously sold, but from what I've heard anyway. For me, it's still a mystery. I'm still trying to find it. I've got to say Vancouver, because I've probably spent the most time here as an adult living. But obviously the home is where I grew up. So that's kind of, but they both don't feel home in a weird way. Yeah, it's a strange one. And I guess what he was going with is, like, imagine you're in their shoes. Like, you're in bonus territory every time you go away because you can come home and you love it. I'm like, oh God, that's almost a dream almost. If you can find your happy place in both types of different aspects of your life.
Right. Well, then, I think about, like, this restlessness that I feel.
Yeah.
Is it because I don't I used to say, I've overstayed my welcome in Minnesota. And my therapist reframed that and said that seems very defeatist. It seems like Minnesota is kicking you out. Maybe let's reframe it to that you have done all that there is that you need to do in Minnesota. That there's nothing more left for you to do in Minnesota. And I like that reframe. And I think about where do I feel most at home? Obviously, Seoul is where I feel the most at home, but where I feel the most productive is in Minneapolis. So there's a Rob Dyrdek from Ridiculousness fame. He is incredibly regimented in his daily routine. It is wild. And that dude is so productive and so intentional about what he does. But he has kind of this what he calls kill mode and chill mode. And I'm trying to kind of figure out, where am I? Am I in kill mode or am I in chill mode? And I think right now, having come back from Mexico City where I was sick and I just really didn't feel well, I felt run down. These last few weeks have been a chill mode for me. So I haven't been as productive. I've tried to move things forward. But the goal then, when I get to Seoul, is to be in that zone where I am creating content.
Yeah.
Because again, I don't have to be the tourist. I am in a city where I feel very comfortable. I'm going back to the same Airbnb that I've been to the last 6 months. So all of that is familiar to me. The neighborhood is familiar to me. I know where everything is. So I'm just going back into this zone of production and creation. And I'm really going to work on consuming less and not taking in so much, but putting more output out there. Because like I said, it's kind of do or die time for me. It's the sink or swim time, because I have put myself on the clock. So I have to navigate that pressure that I'm putting on myself, but I also have to be I need to make sure that I am utilizing whatever skills and whatever resources are going to be the highest return on investment for me, so that I can continue living this lifestyle.
Interesting. Because digital nomadism is not only a journey of, I guess, working and travel at the same time. That's the basic concept. I assume that you're also trying to find that it's not only one place, I'd imagine. There's places in the world where you know that if you go there tomorrow for a month, like you said for Seoul, you can be productive and you love the area. It's somewhere new. You can probably still do some day trips here and there in that month. But, work-wise, it just, something happens there. And I wonder if a digital nomad, they're trying to find those places. Now, do I think Bali is forced upon people? Yeah, because you see it on social media all the time. Like, all this community of digital nomads are there. I'm like, are they there just because they feel they should be there? Or do they really want to be there?
It's interesting that you say that, because I had thought about, because I looked at because Southeast Asia in summer is brutal because it's wet season. But Bali in July and August is pristine. It's actually the best months to go visit Bali. So I thought about, maybe I'll go visit Bali while I'm down, or while I'm over on the side of the world. You should,
go and see it.
But I think the should, or the looking at everybody else, and then I'm kind of like, but it doesn't speak to me. Like, yes, it looks incredible, but am I going because I'm trying to keep up with the Joneses of digital nomads and say, oh yeah, Bali. So it's almost kind of, I've never eaten at White Castle, and I want that on my tombstone. He never ate at White Castle. I think I also want on there, he also never went to Bali.
Well, too late for me.
But it's just kind of, I think it's just kind of a matter of principle, right? It's kind of one of those things like, if I'm going to go, I'm going to go because I want to go, and not because I feel the pressure that I quote unquote should go, or that I have to go. It's something that I want to truly experience. And I had a hard time even going back to Chiang Mai, because I'm like, well, I already spent 2 weeks there. Why would I go back to? But the thing is, I need to be in a city that I've been to before so that I can focus.
Yeah, and this is the beauty of this lifestyle, is you can choose where to go at any point of the year if you have an income on the road, right? Or by internet, basically. You just need a laptop, because you can choose these places. And it's a refreshing thing to see when I see digital nomad and they're currently somewhere that's not cliche. Because it means it's genuine. Like an example, I was doing research on travel podcasts, and there's one called Zero to Travel by Jason. I messaged him because I wanted to come on the podcast. Don't know if he will, but he is a digital nomad as well. But he's based in Oslo. I'm like, that's great, because one, it's bloody expensive in Norway, probably the most expensive place in Europe. So two, he obviously loves it, because in theory, as a digital nomad, why would you base yourself, based on what you see on social media, in somewhere that's expensive? Could you go to Bali, or if it's cheap? So it's like, that's refreshing to see. I'm like, there are people there who generally go to places because they want to be there, not because they feel they should be there. So I think that's part of the journey of not only trying to get work and be remote, but also trying to find those places. But I would add a third thing to that, and this is what I've learned this year in my travels, is you need a home base as well. I think personally, this is maybe a personal thing. Like, we talked about this travel this year, and like, we can't go anywhere just to be ourselves. That's ours, because we don't own a property. Now, I get it that people are like, oh, it's okay, you bounce. But like, I'm like, but I want 2 months at home where I don't have to do that. So that's where
I'm finally able to sleep in my own bed.
Yeah.
After 2 years, I loaned my bed and loaned my mattress and my bed frame to a friend of mine, and his 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old kid slept in it for 2 years. And then when I came back, I was like, hey man, I think I'm going to get my bed and bring it back to my dad's. And so sure enough, we packed it up, we moved it back to my dad's, and I've been sleeping in that bed ever since. It's like, oh, this is the life. This is the goods right here.
You just need that, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I love travel, don't get me wrong, but sometimes don't people feel like they just want to go back to a base? And it's easier said than done, because property is expensive, and our generation are going to struggle to buy anything at this rate. But if it's a possible thing to do, then I can see why people would get a property under their belt, just so they can just chill out and not feel the pressure, have to go somewhere else.
Right. Yeah, no, listen, it'd be great if I still had my condo in Minneapolis that I could always come back to. The only problem is that, when you're traveling, then you're paying 2 rents.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
It's kind of, you can't really rent it out, and then when you come back, be like, hey, you guys got to find a hotel.
yeah, that's a problem.
If I could find a duplex and rent out one side, and then maybe Airbnb the other side while I was traveling, that would be ideal. But even now, like, interest rates are really high, so there's no need to buy anything at this point.
Yeah. And where can people find yourself and your podcast and your brand if they want to get in contact and have a chat with you?
Yeah, so the easiest way is to follow me on Instagram. It's mindful_midlife_crisis. You can follow and listen to the Mindful Midlife Crisis podcast wherever you get your podcast. You can email me at billy@mindfulmidlifecrisis.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. I like connecting with people on LinkedIn quite a bit.
I'll find you.
It's Billy Lahr, Lahr. If you are interested in learning more about meditation, I do weekly meditate and mingle sessions every Monday at 8 p.m. Central Time. Now, if you're listening to this in some other part of the world, you might have to do the math. I'll tell you now that 8 p.m. Central Time is not super conducive to those of you who live in Europe. But I might be opening up another session that'll be on Tuesday evenings at 8 p.m. Korean time. So that would be sometime in the morning for those of you in Europe. So you can do the math on that one. I can't remember what it is in terms of doing that. I know that a lot of you might be working, but if you're digital nomads and you're a traveler, and I'm guessing that's probably the audience here, you can check that out. So how do you find that? You can go to www.mindfulmidlifecrisis.com. That's the website. And up at the top, just click on where it says join, meditate, and mingle. It'll take you to an information page. If that's your jam, sign up and you'll get an invitation to join those virtual sessions. It's a lot of fun. I have people from all around the world who come to those sessions. I've got a group of regulars who come now. So it's a good time. And like I said, I practice meditation so that I can be this level right here. You know, I run in the red a lot, so I try to practice meditation so I'm in the orange and in the yellow, and try and find those moments of blue and green where I'm just like, oh, this is so chill and I'm relaxed right here. So I love doing that, especially for those of you who are digital nomads out there. And if you're struggling with that isolation and you're struggling with that loneliness, let's connect in some capacity. Let's just have a conversation. Let's talk. I mean, we've been talking for 2 hours here.
Yeah, I know.
So this is a lot of fun. I mean, we can have,
it's so good.
It's great to have conversations with travelers out there, and don't be afraid to be vulnerable and open up, and especially if you're struggling with your mental health and you're feeling low, look at options, things like BetterHelp, or let me know, and maybe I can help you with things too. If I'm not the right person, maybe I can direct you in the right direction. So reach out to me. I love knowing who listens to these kinds of podcasts. And if you made it this far, congratulations. I applaud you, because there was a lot of ranting and raving in this episode from me.
That's why I do long form, right? To get these emotions out. Yeah. Okay, I'll put the links in the show notes so people can click on those. So it'd be easy for them to find you. Don't worry about that. And we're going to finish the episode with some quick fire travel questions. These are normally some of your favorite things you've seen on your travels, which would be quite cool. So I'm going to kick off with...
It's travel question time.
Your top 3 favorite countries that you traveled to.
Yeah, so I like breaking them down into cities, because I've been to a bunch of different cities throughout. So I'll say, well, Portugal is number 1. Portugal's number 1. Korea's number 2. And then I did really like Thailand. Thailand has the best food of all.
Number 1.
Thailand has the best food.
Okay, as you're talking about food, stop there.
Yeah.
Top 3 favorite cuisines worldwide.
Ooh, so the khao soi, then you get that in northern Thailand. Yeah. It's like a coconutty soup, and they throw a chicken leg in there. Oh my God. It's absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. And then number 2 has to be the green curry chicken in Thailand. Just one of my absolute faves. I love it. And then budae jjigae in South Korea. So budae jjigae is army stew. People are going to laugh because you're going to be like, what? So it's ramen, it's cut up hot dogs, it's Spam, it's sausage. They throw it all in there, and you're like, are you? No, it is delicious. If you watch, no, trust me, it's my favorite. And if you like spicy food, it's so good, it's delicious. And if they feature it on Somebody Feed Phil in the Soul episode, so you can check it out right there.
Yeah, watch some of the stuff. Yeah,
it's so amazing. Budae jjigae. Check it out. It's so good. So good.
Okay. And let's do your top 3 favorite cities. You mentioned that before.
Okay. So top 3, it's Lisbon, Seoul, and then so here, not necessarily in my top 3, but an underrated city.
Yeah, please.
Is Toronto.
I did not expect that answer.
Toronto. I love Toronto. It is a fantastic city. It's a fantastic food city. Yeah. Incredible food city, underrated food city. So yes, Toronto is my sleeper pick in there. I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Okay. And what about 3 countries you've not traveled to that's next on your hit list?
Yeah, good question. So Costa Rica, I definitely would like to visit Costa Rica. just somewhere in South America, because I want to paddleboard off the coast of South America. And I would like to do New Zealand, but I don't know that I want to do that one solo. That's not a solo travel expedition for me.
Okay.
I think I'm kind of getting to the end of solo travel. So female digital nomads out there, if you are listening, you can send me a message, and maybe if we hit it off, we can go explore some more places throughout the world. I've been solo traveling for a while now. It'd be nice to travel with somebody who I enjoy being around and who can put up with my bullshit.
Okay. And what about a city in the world to drink a coffee and watch the world go by? Where are you going to sit and watch?
Ooh, I like that question. So if I'm just going to sit and watch the world go by, I mean, it's so easy to say, sit along the Han River in Seoul. You can go there and watch the Bompo Bridge light and water show. It's just so beautiful. And then you just see or you can climb up the Inwangsan and see the city from the mountain and go there around sunset and see the sunset, and then stick up there for the city lights to come on. And nothing lights up at night like Seoul. Nothing lights up like Korea. It's just absolutely incredible. So I mean, clearly I'm biased. I have this love affair, but I'll also go back to, I kind of had a moment like this in Lisbon where I was sitting along the river and I was looking out over the bridge that looks just like the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah, that one, yeah.
But I was sitting along the river, and it was kind of a popular, might have even been a touristy spot there, but people were coming and going and having drinks, and I was just sitting there and watching the sunset and taking in the scenery. Yeah, it's incredible. And if you want somewhere where there's nobody around, to me, the most memorable sunset that I ever had, or that I ever witnessed, was I was on the beach of Troia, which is about an hour and a half away from Lisbon. And I looked to my left and I looked to my right, and there was nobody on that beach. And I had that sunset all to myself, and it was just really incredible to experience that, because the colors of the sky that night, I mean, it was just purple and orange and blue and these beautiful radiance, and it was just a really magical moment. So yeah, I would say those three spots. And you know, I love helping people plan these kind of trips and helping people have these kinds of experiences. So that's another thing too. If you need someone to plan out a week-long trip for you in one of these cities, let me know. That's like, again, it'd be a dream for me to do that.
Okay. What about 3 places? I didn't ask this earlier, actually. 3 places that you didn't like, or let's just go didn't like.
Yeah, so Mexico City, it didn't resonate with me. Barcelona, and then St. Petersburg, Florida can go fuck itself. I do not like St. Pete's at all. It was just, I have no desire to ever go back to St. Petersburg, Florida. That was not enjoyable at all.
Okay. Interesting. I'm gonna flip this then. If you could pick one country in the world to go and live for a year, I'm going to exclude here that you've not lived in before, but I'm going to have to exclude USA and Korea, because I think you would go there. Yeah, they're given. So another one that you maybe think, oh, do you know what? I'll try that for a year. Where are you going to go?
I'd probably go back to Portugal. I do love Portugal, but I would be. I was going to say Costa Rica, but I don't know. That seems pretty off the grid. So I don't know how off the grid I want to be. I love Metro Transit.
Okay.
So I could see myself doing like Valencia, Spain.
Dream.
Yeah. I've never been. I wouldn't mind checking out Valencia, Spain, or Prague, Man, I do love Prague. That was an incredible city too. But if I'm going to live somewhere for a year, I'm really trying to avoid winters. So,
Yes, that blew mine.
so maybe somewhere Mediterranean or a bit more tropical. Chiang Mai too. I would love to. I think I can make that happen. Except for burning season is in like March and April, and burning season, the air quality there is uninhabitable. It's really, really awful. So I don't know that I'd want to be there. And I think that's the thing. Like, is there any place that's perfect? I think Portugal. I think Portugal is perfect all around.
Yeah, I think Portugal or South Spain. God, yeah. Anyway, what about a favorite walk or hike that you've done?
So I'll give Puerto Vallarta a shout out here. There is, I think it's called the Seven Beaches hike, and you have to take a boat in order to get to the beach, and then you get off, and then you just go on this hike just along these cliffs, and you hit 7 different beaches along the way.
Wow.
And it was a really, really cool experience. And so I would recommend that. And then there was another time too. It wasn't necessarily the greatest hike, but we got to this waterfall and you could jump into the waterfall.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of fun too. I also love that you can, I walked from Lagos in the Algarve to, what's the name of that city? I can't remember the name of that city, but I walked from one city in the Algarve to another city just along the limestone cliffs. And it was incredible.
Wow.
So there's not a lot of elevation. You're not going up and down, but you are walking along those cliffs with the ocean just to the side of you. And it's limestone, so you kind of need to be a little careful, so that you don't slip and go over the edge there. But it was really, really something. I definitely, those walks stand out to me for sure.
Okay, and 2 more questions. Last one actually is, what about a country that's the best value for money? Where does the dollar go the furthest?
I think northern Thailand, so like Chiang Mai, even Bangkok too. Money went far there. Hanoi and Da Nang, I thought things went far there too. Portugal, things were affordable. Obviously a little bit more expensive than those other cities that I mentioned.
Yeah.
But Seoul is up there too, but not as much as those other cities, I would say. But yeah, Porto, I was really surprised at how cheap things were in Porto, and then when I got to Bangkok and Chiang Mai and Hanoi and Da Nang, I was like, oh wow, things are really, really cheap here. But then when you go to Vietnam and you take money out of the bank, or out of the ATM,
dong.
Well, it's dong, and like you're a millionaire. Because you have because like 200,000 dong is like $10 or $15 or something like that.
30,000 to 1, something like that. I think when I was there, but
So if you take out $1 million dong, it's only like I don't know, like however much, $50, whatever have you. But you're millionaires. You just like, I got all this money. So it was the one time in my life.
At any time, Okay. The last question is final words of wisdom for someone maybe who is thinking about going traveling, but is maybe a bit nervous or scared. Like, what would you give some advice to them of why they should take the leap, or at least plan to, and get out there and travel the world?
Yeah, I like this advice from Jason Robinson. So I'm going to give him a shout out. He's got a lot of nomad books out there. So it's called, I think it's the Nomad Experiment. Jason Robinson. He was on my podcast, this episode 84. But the reason why I connected with him is because he was on another travel podcast. And I was like, I really like what this guy has to say. And his recommendation was, because he's like me, he didn't start traveling until he was younger, or excuse me, till he was older.
Yeah.
His thing is, if you live in the United States, just start traveling around the United States first. And I mean, get familiar with unfamiliar areas in the United States, because it kind of breaks you in. to what traveling is like and what you have to get used to when you travel, right? And so I think just kind of, and then just kind of branching out from there, right? Especially if you're nervous about it. If you're nervous about it, maybe try and go with somebody. Or go somewhere where you have a friend. Maybe it's overseas, maybe it's abroad, what have you. But maybe you have a friend over there and you're just like, hey, can I come visit? And go visit that friend. And if you're like, I don't want to infiltrate their person's space, get an Airbnb. But then at least you know that you can not rely, but you can ask your friend for help or for recommendations. The other thing too is if you go somewhere, it's, a lot of times your Airbnb host will provide you with information. My Airbnb host in Seoul gave me tours all the time, and his mom cooked me meals and dropped them off. It was adorable. So if you get the right Airbnb host, they'll be very resourceful for you. So use those resources around you. If you're new and you're traveling in the States, or you're traveling in Canada, or you're traveling in Europe, just explore a different part of your own country. Or, Europe, you've got countries kind of next door. You don't have to go too far to explore, but just kind of start small and work your way out.
That's awesome. So Billy, it's been a 2-hour chat. We've covered a lot of ground. It's been one of the most flowing chats, I think. We just, apart from my cough and fit in the middle, I think we covered a lot of areas, and half travel, half your stuff. The mindful stuff has been great. I think we've talked about a load of stuff, and I think there's been some light bulb moments as well. So yeah, thanks for coming on. It's been a great chat.
Yeah, thank you. I really, really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to listening to this. And I, like I said, you probably get a lot of pitches, and I'm eternally grateful that you had me on the show. And if people are listening, reach out. I'd love to connect with you.
Awesome. Thanks, Billy.
Thank you for listening to my Winging It Travel podcast episode today. You can find me on Instagram at James Hammond Travel or Winging It Travel Podcast. You can search for both. I release weekly clips of this podcast episode, as well as photos from the last 8 to 10 years of my travels. You can also follow me on TikTok, Facebook and Pinterest by searching Winging It Travel Podcast. I do release daily content to do with travel and the podcast throughout the week. Also check out my website, jameshammond.org. There's content about myself, my travels, and there's also a newsletter sign up as well as a contact form. Finally, please rate and review the podcast on Podchaser. This is my platform of choice. Alternatively, you can rate this on Apple or wherever you get your podcasts from. This really helps the podcast gain a bit of traction for the future in terms of guests and content. And I'm glad to see that you guys are listening out there, reviewing it and enjoying the content so far. Stay safe, stay humble, keep listening, keep traveling, and I'll catch you soon. Cheers, James.